Perfect. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for hanging through a long day. It's been really exciting to hear all of the conversations around New York. It's definitely a river that's near and dear to our hearts. We lived on its shore in Sarah Creek for, 13 or 14 years. That's not even counting the time at VIM. So New York is a wonderful place. And I got my start at NERR, so it's really nice to come back and participate in this conference as well. So thank you. I love the tiny story and the 6-word story that you've challenged us all. And so I thought I would share my York River story of river where history, military, and science merge. And we've butted up against those a couple times in our boat when we've gotten a little too close to the other shore. So we know exactly about the multiple uses there, but it's just such a beautiful river. And then my maybe professional story is scientist communicator seeking to close gaps. And so thank you, Circe, for the introduction and really giving some of that backstory. I just wanted to jumping in of like, why is this even important? Why do we need to share our stories and engage others? And this is an example from the current May issue of the Bay Journal. And we're probably all in some way underneath the umbrella of the Chesapeake Bay program and the TMDL and the WIPs and trying to meet some of these water quality goals. But there's so many other goals as well. There are 31 outcomes through the Chesapeake Bay program that maybe we all connect to in some way. And if not, there are probably other metrics that you are trying to meet, habitat restoration or restoration acreage or water quality concerns. So I'm just using this one as an example, but I think it's probably one that may apply to a lot of people on this. Out of the 31 goals that are meant to be met by 2025, 7 are probably unlikely, as you can see here from the Bay Journal article, unlikely to be met, and another 6 were challenged to meet. And part of the reason for this is these yellow arrows are pointing to the challenges, and many I realize maybe to see here, but hopefully you can see it. It's unwilling landowners, need to engage with local leaders, conflicting priorities, things like climate change and the stressor that is bringing to the ability to meet that goal. So it really is what got us here isn't going to get us where we need to go, is that we know that we need to include others in this effort to really make a difference. So, and I also want to point out to the diversity and inclusion goal, I think that's really important, no matter what we're doing, is that we can't get there without having everybody engaged. And science is truly important, but sometimes we've left out the social aspect of that and engaging others in meeting these goals. There. So in the early 2000s, Cash and others published an article that talked about the concept of the loading dock. And it was really about how science sort of delivers their product to this virtual loading dock that others might not even be aware of. And so sometimes, and I've been guilty of this too, building products and tools or just information. So it can be delivered to a scientific journal, or to a conference. Sometimes it's a website. Sometimes it's just that we think that we've delivered what's valuable. But others are sort of left questioning, or they don't even know it's there. And so to sort of close this gap, we really need to do a better job of thinking about how we deliver and co-produce science that meets societal needs. And sometimes that is engaging people in the conversation. And I'm going to run through a couple of the things that we found. We've been doing science communication for about 11 years now through Greenfin Studio. And so we've learned a little bit, but if I could show you the rest of our offices, it's lined with books of trying to learn from others and from other fields, because other people really have gotten this down, whether it's marketing. And the reason that we all go to Starbucks and pay $5 for a cup of coffee, it's because people know how to communicate and really engage and make us want things that we didn't know we needed before. So one of the ways that this has played out with us is listening with empathy. And this is an example of, again, through the Chesapeake Bay program and their the wetlands goal that I mentioned. To get pretty specific about that one, they are challenged with meeting and restoring 83,000 acres of wetland by 2025. And they were 9% of the way when we started working with them. I don't think there's any expectation that they can make up that other 91% in a couple of years, but we all need to close the gap. And there's a bigger social need for more wetlands. Wetlands, I think you all know, I mean, it's preaching to the choir here, but they're important for water quality and habitat and other reasons. And that's usually what we were leading with, is those sorts of issues and priorities. When we came on board, we were really just challenged with that. Help us close the gap. And we started by interviewing a lot of people. We talked to over 100 people throughout the Chesapeake Bay watershed, from farmers, farmland owners, which may not be active farmers, extension agents, environmental advocates, contractors, county executives, a lot of different people to find out, what are the challenges here? There are programs that provide these cost share funding to get wetlands there. We all think they're super important. Why is it not gaining traction? And what we heard from a lot of farmers and farmland owners is, one put it most succinctly: don't sell me on a wetland, sell me on why a wetland is valuable to me. And that was the aha moment for us, of really listening to people and understanding, so what are their challenges and what would make them want a wetland and what would be a challenge for them to have it. And there were a lot of challenges for them, including that programs are very technical. There are a lot of programs out there that will fund this through USDA and the Farm Bill and others, but they're pretty technical. You need a guide to sort of understand them. Those programs change year to year. They're not consistent from location to location. So if you're a farmer in Maryland, they're going to be completely different. You really do need to know somebody on the ground that can help you. And so other ones were land use decisions. If they put something on their land, it might restrict them from making other decisions later on. It might mean access, all sorts of things. And then we turned it around and we're like, well, let's talk to some of the people that have installed a wetland and created one on their property. Why did they do it and how did it work? And we heard a lot of things that really resonated with us and we felt would resonate with others. Is that one farmer was talking about, he now has a living discovery channel in his backyard, and he can watch this water feature change with the seasons of time in a way that he never even thought about. And he wished he'd done it a long time ago. Others want it for water management on their property. Others want to fish and have a place to take their grandchildren to play in. So there were lots of things that we as scientists and people working in the region hadn't really talked about before. And ultimately it allowed us to build a tool with farmers and with extension agents that was sort of a match.com for them. And so they can check boxes about the restrictions or requirements they want to do. And then it spits out with their zip code, here are the exact people that you should talk to and the programs that you're eligible for. And we've gotten calls from USDA and from farmers that they are actually using this tool. And one USDA farmer or manager called us, I think it was last year, the year before, and said, I want to talk to the person that created this. And I was like, yes, that would be us. And he said, I've been working here for 13 years and farmers are calling me to use this tool. And I just want to thank you. And so it's just nice to hear that when you do listen, you can seek change. So I'm not a big rules person. And I know many of you have used these today, and the others that presented today probably do these and others, and we can all learn from each other. But these are just 5 pretty simple tips that we've learned throughout our time. The first is identify your audience. Is that a lot of people think they're talking to everybody, is that everybody should care about what I'm talking about. And while that might be true, Meredith Hill, who's actually a travel PR specialist, says it correctly. When you speak to everybody or everyone, you speak to no one. Because it's very general and you're not really getting to who needs to do what, why should a person care, what's life look like from that particular perspective. So it's really helpful to identify who do you need. And it might be a county executive who really cares about roads and transportation and human health and economic development. And then that helps you understand, okay, well then I need to put things very succinctly, and it might also shape the way that you deliver it in terms of very short slides and making it visual or something else. So identifying your audience has been incredibly important for us to really understand how do we deliver that message and what terms are we using. So the other way, like once you identify your audience, how do you get to know them? And I talked a little bit about the experience with the farmers and wetlands work. And Here's another example of getting to know your audience and really understanding what resonates with them. This is a project that we worked on in New England with ecosystem-based fisheries management, which is a big mouthful of words, and a lot of people are struggling to understand what it really means. And again, we went out and we listened to understand the audience. And in this case, gosh, probably 9 different groups. This is a visualization of all of them, because at the beginning, you know, again, if you talk to everybody, you speak to no one. As you can see, these are the concerns and some of the benefits from those audiences. So you see fishermen and seafood dealers and processors. This is benthic, so ground fish fishermen and seafood processors. Not always lumped together, but in this case, they shared some of the same concerns. Same thing with environmental nonprofits and the public. And then some of the pelagic fishermen and recreational fishermen shared some of the same concerns. So again, this is more visualization than trying to put people in pigeonholes. But what we see are these core messages that really resonate with a lot of people. People want a healthy ecosystem that's resilient to change. They want to understand what's feeding into management, know how that management system works. And so in the case of an ecosystem-based fisheries management system, it really is about a more holistic look at understanding the entire ecosystem and not just a single species and using just one lever. It's looking at all of them in relation to each other, which means that they really need to know what kind of data is feeding into that. So that was a concern pretty much across the board, including scientists wondering where the data was coming from and making sure that it was robust enough to really support a system like this. And then you can get into some of the others. You know, we're data wonks at the end of the day too. And for recreational fishermen, they really wanted to know what's going to give us better fishing for anglers. If the system goes towards ecosystem-based fisheries management, does that mean we'll have more catch? Because we're really interested in that, or more habitat. And then for the environmental groups, of course, they're interested in things like habitat protection and accountability in the system. If one stock shifts, what happens? So again, it's just another way. Once you really listen, you can start to segregate your audiences and understand what matters to them and how to really talk to them and frame the solutions around it. The third one is really a lot of what we've talked about today, and talking about connecting through visuals and stories and emotion. Our brains really do light up with story. Facts and statistics don't build connections, stories do. I think that's been proven again and again with research in psychology and sociology and lots of other ways. A couple of examples. The one on the left, we use NOAA's data to tell a story about how the Chesapeake Bay ecosystem works in very visual ways. And the audience there were teachers. We thought it might be more of a general public, or those that cared. And when we did our research, that teachers were really hungry for this information and they wanted it in their classrooms. So we worked very closely with a team of teachers to help develop a curriculum around that. And so now NOAA's data is feeding directly into classrooms and explaining how the bay works. And I know it's not 100% clear for everybody, but it's very visual and interactive. And so kids can get in there and look at dissolved oxygen over time and how that relates to striped bass production and other things. And then on the right, it's an infographic, and we do a lot of visualization and film. But this particular infographic on the right is about all the moving parts that a VEM study was using with the Nature Conservancy in the lower Chesapeake Bay to understand the interactivity between aquaculture and water quality. And so this was part of a larger communication set of packages, but you can see part of it is they were studying the phytoplankton, and they actually had divers in the water, and they had a sediment sampler. So there were a lot of different pieces. And so we worked very closely with aquaculture growers to help them understand what was happening there and landowners. And that graphic really does tell a story that if you tried to write it in words, I don't know that it would connect with as many people. So, and then the fourth one is addressing the barriers head on. There are, not to be Pollyanna about all these things, we do know, going back to the wetlands example, we know that there are barriers for people adopting and making change that will protect the environment. And, let's address those head on and not try to move over them, because it's not going to get us there if we don't talk about it. are there technical or financial resources that would be helpful? And if there are, let's make it clearer about how to access those. Do the landowners or the audience in question, do they need more control in the process? Are they familiar with how it works? Is the scale of solution right for them? That's been a mismatch on climate change for years of understanding a global problem, but what's an individual or even a community's role in it. And then sometimes there's a win-win solution. We're working with a group of farmers on Delmarva and looking for ways to both create and support sustainable farming along with a healthy watershed. And there are many win-win solutions there. So, sorry. Then the last one is meeting your audiences where they are. And a lot of times in the world we're in right now, it can look like this upper left of everybody's on Zoom or Hopin or other virtual platforms. And so trying to make connections that way. A lot of times it's on social, and that's just sort of a necessary evil of making sure that your message can get out that way and you're connecting. Sometimes it's in their field of going to people. So sometimes, meeting your audiences where they are can be physically, but also just where they are in their priorities and their values. And so making sure that you're connecting on both of those fronts. In the lower left, this is an example of a model to connect with local governments to help them understand why those outcomes, this habitat restoration, water quality outcomes are really important to them. And we tied it back to economic development. And then also things like trees increase student test scores, and that's demonstrably true. We have lots of research that shows that housing prices go up by about 6%, not 60, when natural areas and trees are adjacent to those properties. So there are real economic reasons why people should care about these outcomes, and things like urban trees can come in and they can be embraced by a lot of different groups. And then jargon is one of the big communication killers, we know. So in the case of the management project, we also created a visual glossary, because sometimes if you can show people what it means and give them much more simple words, it's okay to use those words. And sometimes there's no way around it. Things like bycatch and apex predator, we knew they were going to be used. And so it's just explaining that and making it very visual so it's more accessible, because we know as soon as people hear jargon and they don't understand it, they'll turn you off. And we didn't want that. So these are just some ideas that I hope are useful to everybody that's listening and is trying to communicate, because we all have to take that leap. We all have to do a better job of communicating. Cersei and I have talked. I feel like we're at a turning point where we've gotten a lot of the way there on wherever that is, in terms of Chesapeake Bay program goals or York River goals or whatever your particular goals are. We've gotten a certain amount of the way there, but there's a bigger gap to close. And socially, it feels like we're a very divided country right now. And I would like to think that facts still matter. It's just a matter of making connections. And these are, and I really hope they work for others. So I'd be happy to take questions. I don't want to take up more time this afternoon. I really appreciate everybody hanging on, and I hope this has been helpful. So thank you so much.